So I've been talking about how to accept yourself and truly love and respect you in the way that you deserve. Or do you really deserve it? Have you seen those pictures of the angel and devil on somebody's shoulders? I am sure you would recognize this. Everyone has a little angel and a devil that show up, perch on their shoulder, and try to influence our actions. Well, not literally of course. It is just that we all make choices a lot of times based on how we feel at the moment. What we want to do. What we need to do. The right thing typically leads to us feeling good about ourselves and maybe helping someone. The wrong thing may lead us to feel good for the moment, but in the long run most people tend to fear judgment of some kind. Man, that was cool, but should I really have done that? Was that the right way to go? There is that cliché phrase about not being able to look yourself in the mirror. Why is that? Do we see ourselves differently? I have to ask on occasion, do our actions represent themselves through our mirrors? Should they? Sure, there may be circles under our eyes or a lack of a smile because of guilt, whether warranted or not. But I do not think it should really change the way you see yourself. Maybe this is just a case of my taking something too literally, a common autistic trait, but think about it. Do your decisions have a real effect on the way you see yourself physically? For worse or better? To help or to harm? I believe personally that the only real judgment is our own. We make decisions because that is what we are supposed to do. That is an important part of living. Every choice is a new path. Every path leads to a new place. The point I'm making here is about self-acceptance. Self-love, self-respect, self-honor. It is very hard to forgive ourselves at times for decisions we have made and things we have done or said, or not said over the years. Some things may stem back to when you were a kid. The act of dwelling on one's own past and guilt can make it difficult to accept and love ourselves completely, unconditionally. Unconditional. Does anyone here really understand what that means? It means without condition of any kind. Total loving acceptance of your body, mind and soul. And that is a tough one. To understand that you're physically flawless and perfect. To recognize, acknowledge, understand, and perfectly accept the things we do not really like about us. Like, I have a temper sometimes. I do not like that. I keep it in check, except when playing video games, and I work on changing it. Understanding, acceptance, forgiveness, and realizing beauty. We are divine artwork on the outside and on the inside. We are who we are so we can acknowledge, accept, forgive it, and love perfectly. Unconditionally. Then we can learn to see others the same. After all, we are the same. I know how hard it is, however. I mean, unconditional love and respect of yourself is hard enough. Now we have to learn to do it for others. Let's face it, we are all pretty different, and that is what makes life fun. We fight like cats and dogs. We argue and debate and consider and often find ourselves trying to understand the other perspective. That can be easier said than done. You ever get a hug from someone you do not like? I was arguing with a woman at work over the way things should be done. I was following the rules and she wanted to do things her own way. Not only that, but she turned out to be a very dishonest person. So our supervisor set us both down and the three of us talked it out, eventually coming to a mutual agreement. Although things started to go downhill from there, we did have that moment of respect and understanding, however brief. Then as our meeting was ending, she actually gave me a hug. It was uncomfortable to say the least, and later I realized that was the point. It can be very trying to step out of one's comfort zone. It can be much more difficult to see the good in people you do not get along with. I got to know this woman. We fought, argued, disagreed, she would lie about things, and I would prove her wrong. But overall I made a conscious effort to focus on the things I did like about her. Her passion for environmentalist, her positive attitude, the fact that she was a hard worker, cooking skills, that's one of my passions, and other things. I have learned how not to be from people I do not agree with, but we can learn other lessons from them as well. Unfortunately they are perfect too. They themselves, like everyone else, are a work of pure, beautiful divine art. They have opinions and dreams and desires all their own, and that is something to be respected. Even if their opinions are wrong. I mean, even if you do not see eye to eye. Maybe you can at least try to see soul to soul. And speaking of opinions, there sure are a lot of them. About everything. Everyone has something to say and I like to listen. Most of the time. I do not always think of freedom of speech as a right, however, wait for it. I believe it is a responsibility. This is our world and we do not just live here. We are not just a part of it. We help to create it. With every thought, word, emotion, and act we create our reality. I personally believe that has a great deal to do with communication. How we communicate with ourselves, with each other, with our world. I believe that we as creators of this society and this world have a responsibility to interact, respond, and at least try to understand things. Try to change the things we do not like. Talk about the things we cannot figure out on our own. Everyone, and I mean everyone, has a different piece of the puzzle. We need to work together in order to fit those pieces together. Freedom of speech is not just a right. Debate and talk. The more you learn about each other, the more you learn about yourself. Politics, for instance. There is so much to talk about when it comes to politics, and it gets things done. It helps create change. And what we have here, utilizing my freedom of speech to talk to you about the way I see the world. The things I do not understand. About the way I see you. The way I see us. We also have the freedom to say things that people do not like. There is free hate speech. It is the dark side of the moon. An inevitability. With free speech comes the right to say things that people will be offended by, whether the offense is intentional or not. And I believe it is my responsibility to talk about it. You all know what the word bully means. You all know what it is. Most of you know very well what it is like to go through it. Our forefathers and mothers made sure that we had certain freedoms and ensured that they would be defended to the death. And yet the abuse of certain freedoms has led to much death. As fascinated as I am by statistics, people are more than numbers. The amount of suicides brought on by bullying is a staggering and disturbing number. But what is bullying exactly? What does it consist of? How does it affect us and why? This is a much debated topic. Having dealt with this greatly when I was younger, I had no choice but to consider these things. After all, I was both an atheist and pacifist at the time. I was all about thinking and reasoning. Which is why I got my backside kicked 12 ways from Sunday. Physically assaulted by self-proclaimed Christians stating that atheism was on par with Satanism, and others because, well, who better to attack than someone who will not retaliate? It makes sense, right? No, of course not, but bullying itself does not make sense. It is not based on logic, but emotion. Anger, fear, pent-up feelings looking for an outlet. Looking for an excuse. A great bit of it is likely low self-esteem. Putting others down to make yourself feel better. I get it. I do not like it, but I get it. It is also a control issue. A power issue. If a person feels powerless, they have to try and take that power from others. Does anyone know what an energy vampire is? I find it interesting that bullying can have a lot to do with power. The effects can make the other person feel powerless. Again with the mirror. That is how much power we have. Words can change the way we see ourselves in the mirror. The way we look at ourselves. Talk to ourselves. Love or hate ourselves. In my case, the bullying was physical, mental, and emotional, and considerable. How did I survive? The only statistic I am going to give is that in the late 80s the city I grew up in had the highest suicide rate in the country. 2 years running. Why did I survive? Mirrors show us these magnificent and perfect bodies with which we travel through this university called human life. But we are so much more. We are infinitely more than we see or most want to see. We are both infinity and at the same time infinitely fragile. I survived to tell this story, and show you this video. To remind you of how perfect you are and how fragile this world can be. It is our perception that holds it together.